And welcome back to the NFLandU podcast. I'm your host, as always, Hayden Vassar. It's December 20th. We've made it to week 16, people. You can literally smell the postseason in the air. Just a little bit longer. Just got to get through these next 2 weeks. And we've made it to the fun part. A lot going on this week. 16 games to preview, if I'm doing my math correctly. I can't count, really, but I think 16 games through Saturday, Sunday, and the last Monday Night Football game of the year. So should have a fun show today. So why not get into it? We're going to start first with the 3 Saturday games. Remember, there's no recap on this week's show because there was no Thursday Night Football this week. Instead of Thursday Night Football, we get 3 games on Saturday. And I must say, I think the NFL schedule makers really lucked out this year because all 3 games on Saturday are arguably the biggest and best games of the entire weekend. And they all have massive playoff implications in every single one of them. Divisions, playoff standings, team seasons in some cases are all hanging on the line on every single Saturday game, and it should be a very fun day. So, without further ado, let's get into the first game on Saturday. You got the 9-5 Houston Texans in the currently the 4th seed in the AFC playoff picture, and on top of their division right now at 9-5, going to Tampa Bay to take on a 7-7 Buccaneers team that has won 4 straight. Now, Tampa Bay is magical, aren't they? They're in terms of points scored this season, and in terms of total points, they're the number 2 team in the league. Just truly magical. And you got a quarterback who's thrown 30 touchdowns and 24 interceptions. It's been a magical season for a lot of reasons for Tampa Bay. But their offense is on a juggernaut level right now, where they're going to truck you and they don't care who they're going up against. They are going to put up points. And that should scare teams. But there is a slight problem with Tampa Bay right now. And they're hurt. You know, Mike Evans has been out for a while now with a hamstring injury. They officially put him on injured reserve earlier this week, so he's officially done for the year. And Chris Godwin hurt his hamstring in last week's game versus Detroit, their number 2 wide receiver, who also has over 1,000 receiving yards and multiple touchdowns. Sounds like he's already been ruled out for this game with a hamstring injury. Oh, and by the way, Jameis Winston is officially listed as questionable for this game with a knee injury and, of course, the right hand fracture that he's been dealing with for a while. So Tampa Bay is hurting with like a capital H, like 55 capital H's. They are hurting right now. So if Winston plays, he might not be close to 100%. He wasn't 100% last week, and he threw for over 450 yards and multiple touchdowns. But I think the bigger point of concern is, who the heck is Jameis Winston going to throw to in this game without Chris Godwin and Mike Evans? I don't think you can count on Brashad Perryman catching 3 passing touchdowns like he did last week. So maybe this is the game where O.J. Howard comes back into the offensive fold. Just to rub salt in everybody's fantasy football wounds right on championship weekend. It'll be interesting to see what they look like, but I still think they're going to put up points. I really do. Even without Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, I think they'll find a way to score points. And we've mentioned it before that I'm not high up on the Houston Texans secondary. I think that might be the weakest part of their entire team. And that says a lot, considering how bad their O-line has played at times. They played better lately, but they played pretty bad at times. So their secondary isn't the best in the world, but they're going up against a team that can score a lot of points. Now, that's Tampa Bay. That's what they're dealing with. Quarterback might not play. He's questionable. I think he's going to play, but he's not going to be healthy. They're missing their top 2 wide receivers, so they're hurt. And it's in Tampa Bay. Now you look at Houston. And what have we known about the Houston Texans this entire season? They're hot and they are cold. That is what we know about the Texans. And when they're hot and when they're on fire, They have shown to be one of the better teams in the AFC, in my opinion, especially when Deshaun Watson is playing some great football. They've shown that they can go up against anybody and really give anybody a run for their money. And this is an absolute golden opportunity for the Houston Texans. You know why? As we just mentioned, Tampa Bay is hurting. But if if Houston wins this game, they mathematically clinch their division and punch their ticket to the postseason. All they got to do is win. Just go on the road, find a way to win the shootout, I think it'll be a shootout. I really do. Because Tampa Bay's defense is also not very good. Find a way to win the shootout, and you are AFC South champions with a week to go left in the regular season, and everything will be right in the world. But like I just said, they're hot and cold this entire season. Think back. Think over the course of the entire season. What have the Texans done? Remember that game they went to Kansas City and outdueled Patrick Mahomes and gutted out a tough gut check win? What did they do after that? Dropped off a little bit, didn't they? Then think back to the New England game on Sunday Night Football. Got a big primetime win, really took it to the Patriots, got Deshaun Watson and Bill O'Brien's first ever career wins over the Patriots, and they looked like the world beaters again. And then what happened after that? Oh, they get blown out by the Broncos at home. Then what happened last week? They go on the road, beat a high-flying Titans team to take over first place in their division. Big-time road win for the Texans. This is like prime spot for the Texans to suddenly go cold again. Because they've done this all year. Get a big win, drop off for a week or two. And now, I'm not saying that it's like a trap game, because I don't think you can consider Tampa Bay a trap team because, of what their offense has done all year. But I do think it's worth noting that it would be very on par for the Houston Texans to go into this game, lose a shootout, to set up a Week 17 kind of winner-take-all game with Tennessee, which I think would be great for ratings, in my opinion. It would just be like the most Houston Texans thing for this season, that they would go in, lose to an undermanned, hurting Buccaneers team after a big-time road win over Tennessee last week. It just feels like what they've done all year. It'll be a tough out for Houston. Like I said, I think it'll be a shootout. I don't think they can rely on their running game of Carlos Hyde, because the Buccaneers have shown that they are an incredible run defense this year. I think they've only allowed one team to have a 100-yard rusher this season. Only one team. So I think Deshaun Watson's going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting for that team. I'm going to take Houston to win, but I really wouldn't be stunned if Tampa Bay won it. I still think they're going to put up points. It's going to be a shootout, and it's probably going to be the most fun game on Saturday. A lot of high-flying, high-scoring points, and I'm going to take Houston to win it. And we're moving on to the next game on Saturday, the late afternoon one. So, if high-flying, high-scoring points isn't your cup of tea, I'm going to interest you in this game. And this could probably scratch your itch. You got the 10-4 Buffalo Bills, after that big primetime win on Sunday Night Football, going to New England to take on the 11-3 Patriots. AFC East kind of on the line in this one. If you love defensive-heavy football with not a lot of offense, in fact, sloppy offense, this game is for you, my friend. This game is for you. For the second straight week in the NFL, we're getting a matchup between two of the premier defenses in the league. You got the Buffalo Bills, who are third in the league for total defense, averaging giving up 291.9 yards per game, and second in points per game that they give up with 15.9. That's really good. Well, the team that's number one in both of those categories is the Patriots defense, averaging giving up 268.4 yards per game in total defense, and number one in points per game, averaging giving up 12.9. So, I'm going to make a statement, and I really don't know if it's a bold statement or not, or a hot take, as the kids would say. I think the Bills' offense is better than the Patriots' offense. I think the numbers back that up, but I know like 2 months ago people would have called that blasphemous, but at this point, I think everybody's kind of in agreement that Bills' offense is better than the Pats, and Pats' offense is not in a good way. Julian Edelman is hurt right now. If you watched any of that Bengals Pats game last weekend, you could tell he was hurt. So if Julian Edelman is not doing too hot, then who does that passing offense go through? They have yet to get Mohamed Sanu going. I don't know if you can really trust N'Keal Harry, if I remember correctly, the rookie wide receiver, to really handle a big load. So I don't know what that passing offense goes through. Well, then your gut instinct would be to say, okay, well, if they can't get a passing offense going, they'll run the ball, just like they did against Cincinnati. What was that, over 170 rushing yards in that game? Slight problem with that. Bills' run defense is kind of okay. I'm going to say good. I'll call it good. Bills have a quality run defense. They're currently ranked as the 10th best rush defense according to ESPN, giving up 101.4 rush yards per game. So, a top 10 rush defense against the Patriots rushing attack that hasn't really gotten anything all year with the exclusion of that Cincinnati game. So what I'm saying is, I think this is going to be a very low-scoring game, both in part because of the defenses are so good, but also in part because their offenses are going to sputter a lot. If you really liked what happened on Sunday Night Football last week, where the final score was like 17-10, and both offenses combined for like almost 400 yards, then you're probably going to get a repeat of that one in this one. It's really not going to be pretty. I expect very low scoring, ugly offense. And even though I think the Bills are the better offense in this one, I still will go to my grave feeling that, because this Patriots offense just has nothing going on right now. I really want to take the Bills to win this game, because I feel like they're perfectly built to go into Foxborough and win this game. Their defense is good. It can shut down that, nagging, lagging Patriots offense. It'll just come down to, can Josh Allen make just a couple throws? In my opinion, that's what it's going to come down to. The Bills' offense does not have to be perfect. It can be ugly. It can be sloppy. Just get your team in a position to, score maybe 14 to 17 points, and you can win this game, Buffalo. And Buffalo still has a shot at winning the AFC East. Granted, a lot has to happen, but they could still do it. They just have to win Saturday, and then win in Week 17, and the Patriots have to lose in Week 17. So, not a lot. It's unlikely, but still possible that the Buffalo Bills could still win the AFC East. It's been 18 years since a team not named New England has won the AFC East. Oh, that's depressing. I'm going to take New England. I wanted to take Buffalo. I really, really wanted to take Buffalo in this game, because, like I said, I think they're built perfectly to go in and grind out a tough, gritty win. But it's in Foxborough. I think maybe the Patriots defense will make Josh Allen make one or two more mistakes, a fumble, something like that. Because, remember the last time these two teams played earlier in the year, Bills gave the Patriots a run for their money. Their defense absolutely shut down the Patriots offense. It came down to the fourth quarter. Josh Allen got a concussion, had to leave the game. It was a lot going on, but I do think that this Bills team could definitely go in and win, but I'm going to take New England. It's hard to bet against them when they play in Foxborough, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be close. It'll be interesting to see. But if New England wins this game, to my knowledge, if New England wins this game, they will clinch the AFC East, which they haven't done yet. So that's big for them. They win this game, they're AFC East champions. And we're moving on to the last game on Saturday really quick. Another very interesting one. This time in the NFC West. You got the 8-6 Los Angeles Rams coming off an absolutely humbling defeat last Sunday, going to San Francisco to take on the 11-3 49ers, who were also coming off a terrible, humbling loss last week. For the Rams, right now, it is do or die time. Right now. They are still technically alive. A lot has to break their way in terms of making the playoffs. They would have to win out, and the Vikings would have to lose out. But a loss here mathematically eliminates them in every conceivable way. So it's do or die time right now. This is it. There is no tomorrow if you do not win Saturday night. Speaking to San Francisco real quick, they're coming off their worst loss of the year. They lost to Baltimore, and that's one thing. And they lost to Seattle, and that's also one thing. Those two teams are really good, so you can't really fault San Fran for losing those games. But when you allow a lowly Atlanta Falcons team to come into your building and take over in the fourth quarter and beat you, that's another thing. And you got to wonder how they're going to come out and respond the next week. Are they going to be a little flat? Or are they going to come out with clicking on every cylinders? Because if you've ever watched football for years, there's a common saying that, sometimes a team needs to get their bell rung a bit. Needs to take pardon my French, needs to sometimes take an ass kicking to really get focused. That maybe they were believing their stuff a little too much, and now they know that, hey, we got to get serious about this. So maybe they come out and maybe they're on fire, or maybe they come out flat. It'll just be interesting to see how San Francisco plays in this game. And they've been one of the better offenses all season long, the 49ers have. But they just didn't seem like it last week. They were second in the league with points per game at 29.9 points per game. Act like it. Because they sure didn't act like it last week. The same could be said for the Rams. Their offense was doing great, before the Dallas game. They were putting up 500 yards in 2 straight games, clicking on all cylinders. And then they just came out in lifeless in Dallas when they played the Cowboys. So what version of the Rams are we going to get? The last time these two teams played, it was a defensive dominating win for the 49ers in Los Angeles. And they forced Jared Goff in arguably the worst game of his pro career. If I remember correctly, he had less than 100 passing yards, which is very disturbing. And you got to wonder if it's going to be a repeat performance for the 49ers defense. That hasn't really played well the last 2 weeks. They gave up that late touchdown to Julio Jones last week, and then they got 40 points put on them by Drew Brees. Kind of need to, put a little respect back on the 49ers defense. I'm going to take the 49ers to win in this one. I've been riding their train for most of the season, and I see no reason to get off now. 49ers are still alive in the conversation for the number 1 overall seed in the NFC. They just have to win out. They got to win this game, and then next week go to Seattle, which will probably be the Sunday Night Football game, with everything on the line, NFC West and number 1 overall seed in the playoffs up for grabs. I'm going to take the 49ers to win in this one. It'll just be interesting to see how these two teams come out and how they look, considering how they finished off their games last week. All right, so that's it for the 3 games on Saturday. So now we can focus in on what happens on Sunday. And I'm going to be brutally honest. I think there's only one good game on Sunday. And it's in the 1 o'clock Eastern time slot. There's a lot of meh floating around. Some games could be good, but there's only one game where you just see who's playing and it's wow, I got to watch that one. So let's get into Sunday's games, and we'll start off with one of the meh ones. You got the 5-9 Jags, who had that really kind of historical win, if you really want to be honest about it. The last game in Oakland over the Raiders, they won that one. Going to Atlanta to take on the 5-9 Falcons, who have won 2 straight and came off that big win over the aforementioned 49ers. Kind of a Jekyll and Hyde game. What version of each team are we going to get? Both teams are coming off big wins and showed what they're capable of. Jacksonville clawing their way back from a double-digit halftime deficit on the road last week. Really big win, first time to feel good about the Jags for, the first time in a month and a half. That's good for them. And the Falcons pulling off one of the bigger upsets of the year over the 49ers on the road. So it'll be interesting to see what versions we get. The Falcons showed just how deadly they can be on offense in the fourth quarter versus San Francisco when Julio Jones took over on that final drive. Made some pretty big plays. I can't talk. Pretty big plays down the stretch, and Matt Ryan looked clinical on that last drive, and then they got the go-ahead touchdown. Despite their record, their 5-9 record, I've said it before, that team is still playing hard for Dan Quinn, their head coach, and they're not to be taken lightly. Just ask San Francisco. You got an embattled head coach in Dan Quinn, and this team's 5-9, and he's probably going to be gone at the end of the year. And then you turn to the Jags, who have the same exact record. They're 5-9. Their head coach is embattled and probably won't be back. And then that team isn't fighting hard necessarily for him. They've looked lifeless for most of the past month and a half. And you could point to that comeback that they had last week of like, look, the Jags still have something left in the tank. They're not lifeless, and I'm not sure about that. I don't know how much of what happened last week in Oakland can be, considered praise for the Jags, and how much of it could be considered just pure incompetence by the Raiders. It's hard to really discern the two at this point, in my opinion. But, because you got to remember, the Jags are getting blown out by everybody and their great-grandmother until they played the Raiders. And that defense kept them close in that game. They held the Raiders to, 16 total points, no points in the second half. That's pretty good for them. I'm still concerned about that offense. I really am. At no point this season has their offense really been good with numbers that they put up. So if we're thinking about, Jacksonville having to go to Atlanta and put up some points, I don't really see that happening. Even though I like the players they have on offense. I really like DJ Chark. I think Chris Conley's really coming on well. I just can't see them going, having to score a bunch of points to keep pace with Matt Ryan and the rest of that Falcons offense. And that's why I'm going to take the Falcons to win in this one. But I do think it's interesting to note about the Jags and their situation. They fired Tom Coughlin earlier this week, one of their front office personnel, after that kind of a bombshell ruling by the NFLPA that the Jacksonville Jaguars could not force their players to seek medical treatment through the team only, and that they had been fining players for years for not doing so, and that these players could file grievances and maybe get their money back. So that happened on Monday, and Coughlin gets fired Tuesday? Kind of not the best timing in the world. There was talk that Tom Coughlin was going to retire at the end of the year anyway, but they just went ahead and pulled the trigger. And you have to wonder, if... oh, excuse me. You have to wonder if other Jaguars are going to follow suit, like their general manager and head coach Doug Marrone, who, this was kind of going to be a turning point year, and the Jags kind of turned in a not-so-good result. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Jaguars at the end of the year, but once again, I'm taking the Falcons to win. And moving on to our next game, you got a revenge game at 1 o'clock Eastern. You got the 12-2 Baltimore Ravens, who have won 10 straight, franchise record 10 straight, currently hold the longest active winning streak in the NFL, going to Cleveland to take on the 6-8 Browns, who had that loss with the Cardinals last week where, they just ran up and down the field on them. So, revenge game. I want you to think back. This was a very long time ago. Week 4 in Baltimore. Cleveland went there, and what did Cleveland do? Cleveland blew the doors off the Ravens. They blew them out 40-25, racked up over 500 yards of total offense. They forced Lamar Jackson to have probably the worst game of his season. I think he threw 2 interceptions in that one. I'm gonna be honest, I think that was the Browns' best game that they had all year. That was the first time their offense looked like a true threat, and everybody was high up on the Browns after that game. And I think it's very interesting to note that game, Week 4, was the last time the Ravens lost a game this season. That was it. because they lost to I think it was Kansas City the week before. They lost to them. Then they go and get blown out by the Browns, and that's when we were questioning the Ravens' defense. Remember, we were saying, oh, they've let up over 1,000 yards and 70 something points. How can you have faith in this team? Well, look at them now. Look at the Ravens now. The complete and total package. Offense flying high. Defense can stop anybody. They're going to blitz you into oblivion. And what have the Browns become? Still a dysfunctional mess. Oh, you hate to see it. You really do. A lot has changed since then, like I just said. The Ravens are the unquestioned best team in the NFL at this point, and the Browns just find new lows to sink to every week. Now, if you remember that matchup in Week 4, a large part of what the Browns did ran through Nick Chubb, like what they've done all season. So, you could expect to see a heavy dose of him this week, especially with, Baker not playing well, and maybe the rest of that offense really just stopped caring. And here's something to really think about, because the Ravens have one of the more creative running games in the NFL. It hasn't really been talked about as much that the Cardinals have a creative running game and they like to run the ball. And that showed in spades last week when, their running back, I'm forgetting his name right now, Kenyon Drake, thank you. I almost said N'Keal Harry, and I don't know why. Kenyon Drake, had a career high in rushing yards, 4 rushing touchdowns, ran up and down the field on the Browns defense. They had no answers. So if you're getting, run over by the Cardinals rushing attack, imagine what the Ravens rushing attack is going to do to your defense. That is very, very not good. The Browns just feel flat out apathetic right now. They really don't have anything to play for. There's reports that players are screaming to other teams, come get me. It just all feels bad right now. And this feels like, the Ravens are going to come into Cleveland and, hang up 35 by the time the fourth quarter starts, and Lamar doesn't even play the fourth quarter. That's what it feels like. And the Ravens do have a lot to play for, because if they win this game, I do believe they clinch the number 1 seed in the AFC playoffs. And that's what they want. So I'm going to take not Cleveland. Oh, God, no. I'm taking Baltimore to win, and I'm going to take them by a large enough portion to say that Robert Griffin III plays quarterback for the Ravens for the entirety of the fourth quarter. I feel confident in that, because I highly doubt we're going to see a repeat of the Browns putting up over 500 yards of offense and Jarvis Landry, receiving like 100 receiving yards. I highly doubt we're going to see that again. So once again, I'll take the Ravens to win. And we're moving on to a slightly more competitive game. You got the 5-9 Panthers, who have lost 6 straight, going to Indianapolis to take on the 6-8 Colts, who have lost 4 straight. So something's got to give, am I right? Somebody's got to win a game. So, Panthers made it official today, Friday, that rookie quarterback from the University of West Virginia, Will Grier, will be their starting quarterback this week. And if you don't know the name Will Grier, I'm going to read you some stuff real quick about him. Played 3 years of college football. Freshman year at Florida, only played 6 games. If I remember correctly, he got hurt. It was either hurt or suspension. I really can't remember. There was a lot of those for Florida the last couple of years. No offense, but played his freshman year at Florida, then transferred to West Virginia, so he didn't play his sophomore year. Played his junior and senior years at West Virginia, where he played really great, especially his senior year. He put up some incredible numbers at West Virginia in his senior year. And got drafted in the 3rd round by the Carolina Panthers. So, career totals. You ready for this? Career totals. 8,856 passing yards, 81 passing touchdowns, 23 interceptions. Some solid numbers. Those are some solid numbers. So the big question is, what impact will Grier have on the Carolina Panthers offense? That should be the main question right now. And full disclosure, I'm a Texas Longhorns fan. So since they play in the Big 12 and West Virginia plays in the Big 12, I had a front row seat to Will Grier playing for 2 years. And I remember vividly him carving up my Longhorns in Austin, Texas, for a thriller shootout win. What was that, a year ago in his senior year? Truly marvelous, incredible stuff. And I do think was a very solid college quarterback. It's nice to see him get a start in the NFL. And if the Carolina offense is going to get a boost, DJ Moore's been putting up good numbers. Christian McCaffrey is always reliable. They just needed to cut down on the turnovers, and that's all Will Grier needs to do. So, in theory, I think this game could be a shootout because Carolina's defense is not good. We've been over that at length for weeks. Indianapolis' defense has not been good either as of late, giving up an average of 35.3 points per game the last 3 weeks. All 3 losses. So, in theory, this game could be a shootout. Maybe not because there's 2 good offenses, but because those defenses can't stop anything lately. But I think easy path to victory for the Colts would just be to reestablish that running game with Marlon Mack. Try to get something going. It could see a return to form for their running game because as we've talked about at length, the Achilles heel for Carolina's defense is their rush defense. Currently 30th ranked rush defense, giving up an average of 140.2 rush yards per game. You don't have to force Jacoby to air it out and throw up a bunch of numbers. Just run the ball a bunch and you should be fine. And that's why I'm taking Indianapolis to win. I think they've had a solid rushing attack for most of the year, despite everybody and their great grandmother getting hurt. And I'm gonna take the Colts to win it. And we're moving on to Tankathon. You got the 1-12 Cincinnati Bengals, who have lost 2 straight. Worst record in the league. That's important. Remember that. Going to Miami to take on the 3-11 Dolphins, who have also lost 2 straight. So, right now, the Bengals' magic number to clinch the number 1 overall pick in the draft is 1. If they lose this game, they will clinch the number 1 overall draft pick. And then they could start, drawing up plans for the Joe Burrow jerseys. Because that's who I think they're going to take. So, you got to wonder if somebody in the Bengals front office is saying, hey, just go out there and, maybe not try your best. And then you can win a game next week. And everybody can end on a happy note. I do think it's worth thinking about because, it would be the most Bengals thing ever if they win the next 2 weeks and then mess up their draft standing. It would be a very Bengals thing to do. Some would say that the path to victory for the Dolphins would just be to run on the Bengals. They've had the worst rush defense in the entire league the entire year. But there's a problem with that. When you're the Dolphins and your leading rusher for the entire season is Ryan Fitzpatrick, your quarterback? Your very old quarterback who's like 36? That is a problem, my dude. It's not the best idea to, rely on a run-heavy attack if Ryan Fitzpatrick is your leading rusher. I honestly couldn't name the Miami running backs even if I tried. Like, if you told me to name them without looking them up on Google, I wouldn't be able to do it. I have no idea who they are. For the Bengals offense, for 2 straight weeks now, Andy Dalton has thrown a pick 6, so maybe cut down on that. They had, 5 turnovers last week, so if they're looking to win the game at this point, I don't know why you would. Try to get that number 1 overall pick here, people. Try to cut down on the turnovers as much as you can, especially with the pick 6. This is a matchup of 2 of the worst defenses in the league. Cincinnati has the 29th total defense, giving up an average of 391.7 yards per game, and a 24th worst scoring defense, giving up an average of 25.6 points per game. Then the Dolphins have the 30th ranked rush defense, giving up an average of 398.7 yards per game, and 31.1 points per game. That's dead last in scoring defense. So you're thinking, oh gosh, these defenses are so terrible. Does that mean we're going to see a lot of points and scoring bonanza? Maybe. Are you more likely to see a slot fest where everybody turns the ball over and it becomes unwatchable through the third quarter? More than likely. I'm going to take Miami to win. It's in Miami. I think that the Dolphins have shown to be frisky and kind of fun and that they can score points. And the Bengals have not shown that at all this year. I know that they have more of a reliance on Joe Mixon and running the ball now. At this point, I just think the Bengals have already thrown in the towel. They're looking at who they're going to be taking at the first overall pick. Remember, if they lose, they clinch it. So I'll take the Dolphins to win in Miami. And we're moving on to kind of another revenge game, question mark. Not a lot's been made about this one this week, but I think it's worth talking about. You got the 8-6 Pittsburgh Steelers, who, still have to put in some work to clinch their playoff spot, going to New York to take on the 5-9 Jets. Now, why is this a revenge game? Well, because the running back that the Jets paid a hefty sum for in the offseason, Le'Veon Bell, used to play for the Steelers. And if you remember, his last year in Pittsburgh did not end on a good note, because he sat out that entire year looking for more money. And he got, if I remember correctly, they gave him less money in New York than he would have gotten if he had stayed in Pittsburgh. Which is never good. So Le'Veon Bell gets a shot at his former team, and I guess that's an interesting storyline for the week, but during the game, I don't think it'll matter much because, well, Le'Veon Bell's having the worst year of his career under Adam Gase. And, make of that what you will. I think it's worth pointing out that, a lot of players that, are left in the wake of Adam Gase after he leaves kind of flourish. Tannehill, Devontae Parker, Kenyon Drake. So, and now with Adam Gase currently in hold of Le'Veon Bell, he's not doing so hot. So I wouldn't expect that, Le'Veon to suddenly have his best game of the season right now is what I'm trying to articulate here. Steelers defense is, tough, hard-nosed. They've been one of the best defenses in the entire league all season. I've long maintained for a while now that they're one of the top 3 defenses, and they have a chance to show it. You got to wonder how the Steelers are going to come out after that tough loss on Sunday Night Football. I think their defense is going to be fine. It's just maybe their defense is going to take an onus that we have to take more of a charge because we know our offense can't do a whole lot. And that's not a slight on Duck Hodges. I mean, dude's a 4th-string quarterback, and we all know that at this point. If you're expecting Daniel Duck Hodges to go out there and light up the world, then you're going to be very disappointed. But I think a fair expectation is for him to not throw 4 interceptions like he did last week, because that's what got Mason Rudolph benched. Well, not just the turnovers, the fact that he wasn't playing that well to begin with. The 4 interceptions by Duck, try to cut down on those as much as you can. That's really hurting the team. So maybe the Steelers defense is on a notice that, hey, we need to take over more. We maybe need to start scoring some points, if you catch my drift, in order to help ensure a win as best we can. Because if you're putting faith in the Steelers offense, then I don't know what to tell you. And, James Conner is going to play again this week for the Steelers running back. And the Jets have had one of the better rush defenses all season long. So that means if the Steelers offense is going to put up points, it's going to have to come from their quarterback. It's going to have to. So it'll be interesting to see how this game turns out. It'll probably be low scoring. All the Steelers games at this point are low scoring. Nice little probably like 23-14 win. I'm going to take the Steelers to win. I just can't bet against their defense right now, even on the road in New York. I think they get after Sam Darnold in that offense. And I'll take the Steelers to win. And we're moving on to more Tankathon. Yeah! NFC East edition. You got the 3-11 Giants, who are coming off of a nice emotional win last week in what is very likely to be Eli Manning's last start, not just at home, but just as a New York Giant. And going to Washington to take on the 3-11 Washington football team, who have lost 2 straight. Now, I said it sounded like it'll be Eli Manning's last game because it sounds like Daniel Jones is going to be able to go and is healthy enough to play for the New York football Giants. And you know what? That's a good thing. Because like I said on Tuesday's show, that should be how we remember Eli Manning. Going out on a win. Going out on a high note. Not getting benched after a loss for some rookie. This way, the last image we have of Eli Manning on a football field as a starter is a win. That makes me happy. Now I don't care what happens in this game. Now, big question, now that Daniel Jones is back in, will the Giants offense continue what it did where it left off last week? Saquon Barkley looked like his old self that we hadn't seen for the vast majority of the season. Sterling Shepard had a nice game. They had that offensive explosion in the second half where they scored 3 touchdowns on their first 5 drives in the second half. They don't have to necessarily be that in this game, but it'll just be interesting to see if they can get close to something like that in this game. They don't have to be world beaters to beat the Washington football team. They don't. They just have to do something. And you know what? Similarly, something like that can be said to the Washington football team. Dwayne Haskins had arguably his best game of his young career last week. And you look at the numbers and you say, that's not that good to begin with. Well, it was a lot better than what he's been putting out lately. So, he had his best game last week, and I know that's a low bar, but still, now comes the very important part. Building off of that, continuing to grow, and improving week to week. Can he continue to put up some better than his usual numbers? Once again, this is a matchup between two of the not best defenses in the world, and similarly, like we talked about with Miami and Cincinnati, you could say, oh, too bad defenses that let opponents score a lot. That means we'll get a lot of points in this one. You're more likely to get a slot fest. I'm curious to see what it's like in that stadium, though. Because if you've been keeping track of the Washington football team this year, you would know it's become kind of a running joke that whenever they play a home game, it's more like a road game because all of the opposing team's fans are there and none of their fans are there, But you got 2, 3, and 11 teams with absolutely nothing going on. I think we're more likely to see an empty stadium than, a packed house of Giants or Washington fans. So I guess that'll be interesting to look at. I guess we'll know on Twitter about 5 minutes after kickoff. You'll see the screenshots of like a mostly empty stadium. Here's a serious question though. How will the actual winner of this game be determined? Because here's the thing. These two teams, because they're 3-11 and have been getting beat horribly by everybody, they're right next to each other in the draft standings. If I remember correctly, it's like I think if the season ended right now, it's like Washington at 2 and then either the Giants at 3 or 4. Yeah, the Giants would have to be at 4 because they beat the Dolphins. So it would go Washington 2, Miami 3, Giants 4. So my question is, how will the winner of this game be determined? And the quote winner, I have winner here in my notes in air quotes, winner. Because the loser should go ahead of the other in the draft order, correct? So if the Giants lose this game, they should move up to like number 2, if I'm doing my math right. Number 2 in the draft order. And you know what? At this point, draft order should be what matters more to these teams. What does Washington have to do? And the same could be said for the Giants. You're 3-11, you got nothing going on. This is an absolutely meaningless game in the middle of December for both these teams. I know guys are playing for pride and jobs, but in the grand scheme of things, how happy would this win make teams? How happy would this win make a fan of these teams? The answer should be not a lot. I'm going to take the Giants to win. I think they've been the more... I want to say consistent, but can you really say the word consistent about a 3-win team? That's kind of like that's kind of like one of those opposite statements. Oh, they're consistent. How can they be consistent with their 3 wins? I'll take the Giants to win. I just think they have too much firepower in that offense, and if they get more than 17 points, I just don't see how Washington can match that. And I'll take the Giants to win, and we're moving on. Now, Remember when I said there was only one good game on this Sunday, in my opinion? And it's at 1 o'clock Eastern? This is it. You got the 11-3 New Orleans Saints, who are coming off that blowout win on Monday Night Football, going to Tennessee to take on the 8-6 Titans, who are coming off that heartbreaking loss last week. So now here's the deal. This game is important for, New Orleans, chances at the number 1 seed. This game is very important for the Tennessee Titans. Because, by the end of Saturday, we will know if the Titans are still alive in the AFC South. Because either Houston beats Tampa Bay and clinches the division, or they lose and lets the door continue to be slightly ajar for the Titans to maybe get back into it. They kind of have to win out to have a shot at the playoffs, either through their division or the wild card, the Titans. Because they're currently tied with Steelers at 8-6, even though the Steelers are technically in right now if the season ended. They have the same record as the Steelers, but they got to win out. And they have a tough remaining schedule. Speaking to the Saints real quick, and then we'll get back to the Titans. New Orleans is flying high right now. We talked about it on Tuesday. They're clicking on all cylinders right now. They're averaging 34.8 points per game over the last 5 weeks. So their offense is cooking. They're not just cooking, they're setting everything on fire right now. And, especially with Drew Brees playing lights out the last few weeks, they came up on the short end of that shootout with San Francisco, but then he had that monster game on Monday Night Football. They're really coming together on offense right now, and it's become a spectacle to behold. And, the Titans offense has played, really great with the exclusion of that first half versus Houston. But that first half is what's doomed them, They lost because, in my opinion, they started slow in that game. And they've dug themselves too much of a hole. Now, this game will be on the road. It's in Tennessee. It'll more than likely be very, very cold. I wouldn't be surprised if there was some impactful weather involved. On the road against a high-flying Tennessee Titans offense, I think we're going to see points in bunches in this one because, Titans defense, hasn't been, that great. And, the Saints defense has shown that it can be porous at times. So, this might be a very interesting points bonanza in this one. New Orleans is sitting pretty with a great shot at the number 1 seed, but they got to win this game. They got to win this game to keep the pressure on. And, Tennessee needs to win this game because if Houston loses on Sunday, then Tennessee thinks we still have a shot at the division. But even if Houston loses on Saturday, I know I said Houston loses on Sunday. If Houston loses on Saturday and Tennessee then proceeds to lose on Sunday, then Houston still clinches the division. That's how small the margin of error is for the Titans right now. They have to win out just to even have a shot at making the playoffs. Not division, just playoffs. This is a tough one because as you people have known and listened to me rant and rave about the Titans for weeks, that I love them. I've also been ranting and raving about the Saints for the entire majority of this podcast's existence. I mean, if you remember correctly, on the very first episode of this podcast, I said the Saints were going to go to the Super Bowl and win it this year. And I see no reason to get off that train right now. I'm taking New Orleans to go to Tennessee, get a big win, and maybe end the playoff hopes of a really fun Tennessee Titans team. But I think this is going to be a very close game, and Tennessee's going to fight them down to the wire. And I really wouldn't be stunned if the Titans won this game. I think they played good enough to beat the Saints team. I just think it's too much to overcome everything right now for what the Saints are putting down. I'll take New Orleans to win, but man, Titans are fun. And if they're not in the playoffs, that's a shame because they're a really fun team this year. Once again, I'm taking New Orleans to win. And we're moving on to the first of our late games. Here you go. You got the 3-10-1 Detroit Lions, who have lost 7 straight, and if I remember correctly, that's the longest active losing streak in the NFL, so at least there's that. Uh, Going to Denver to take on the 5-9 Denver Broncos. So I said it on Tuesday's show about the Lions, and I'm going to say it here again. Absolutely nothing should be expected of the Lions, of this Lions team right now. Absolutely nothing. Their offense has been non-existent with David Blau in, even though I was ready to give that kid the world after Thanksgiving. They're averaging 14.6 points per game since he became the starter, so that's 3 straight games that he's been the starter in, and their offense really hasn't done much. Now, their offense could potentially get a boost because there's talk that their starter running back, Kerryon Johnson, may potentially play in this game. He may be healthy enough to go. Now, that decision isn't entirely up to him. It's kind of up to the head coach and the rest of the team. But, having Kerryon Johnson is better than nothing. Maybe their offense can move the ball a little bit better. And there's another reason why I said nothing should be expected of this Lions team right now. That Detroit defense is bad, bad, bad. 31st in total defense, averaging giving up over 400 yards per game. Only one of 2 teams in the NFL that are averaging giving up over 400 yards a game on defense. That's not good. And they're the 26th scoring defense in the NFL, averaging giving up 26.6 points per game. So, bad offense, bad defense. It's a terrible combination. Now, speaking to their opponent, the Denver Broncos. They're coming off that tough loss where they had to go on the road. Their offense didn't look too good. It's simple. This is all you have to do. Broncos, go out there, establish your run game with Phillip Lindsay, Royce Freeman, help take the pressure off your young rookie quarterback, Drew Lock, and everything should be fine. Have him make a couple throws, and you should be right as rain. It is that simple. It is not hard to beat this Lions team. I guarantee you it is not that hard. Especially since, I'm going to start using this word with the Lions now. They've been toothless. I've said that about the Bengals, but now I'm going to start saying it about the Lions. They've been toothless for a while. Now they have to go on the road against a statistically good defense in the Broncos. And that road game is in Denver in December. It's cold. They have to go outdoors. There's probably going to be some impactful weather. This sounds like a slam dunk layup win for the Broncos. But if they can't win this one, come on, man. I'll take Denver to win. It just feels like a lot's going against the Lions right now. And this should be a simple, grind out, like a 24-10 victory. Get a lot of run game in this one. And it should be as simple as that. And we're moving on to the next game. Got a California matchup in this one. You got the 6-8 Oakland Raiders, who have lost 4 straight, going to the Chargers to take on going to LA to take on the 5-9 Chargers. Man, I really cannot talk today. Both these teams are coming off of absolutely gut punch losses. Oakland for depressing reasons that we've already been over in this show. And, the Chargers just could not stop turning over the football last week. 7 total turnovers last week. Big point of emphasis for the Raiders. Can you score a single point in the second half? As we mentioned on Tuesday's show, they have now gone 2 straight weeks without scoring a single point in the second half of a football game. That is a sign of a very bad football team. So you got a Raiders team who can't score a point in the second half, and you got a Chargers team that, for the love of all that is holy, stop turning the football over, man. It is. You got Philip Rivers. I almost called him Philip Rivers. Philip Rivers, who is just throwing up hot air balloons every time he drops back to pass, and you got Melvin Gordon fumbling the ball every time he touches it. It's like, my goodness, guys, stop turning the ball over. In last week's game, when they turned it over 7 times, that's almost as many times as the New Orleans Saints have turned the ball over the entire season. My God, people. Why are you making this so difficult? it's hard to really say anything positive about either team at this point. They've just been so depressing as of late. Here's a little tidbit that may decide the game. The Chargers have not lost to Oakland at home since they moved to Los Angeles a few years ago. And we've already established that, the Raiders have not been a good football team on the road this year. That's good enough for me. I guess I'll take the Chargers in this one. I really don't feel confident about either choice, though. I really don't. I'll take the Chargers to win. And we're moving on to maybe an interesting game in the late afternoon time slot. You got this 4-9-1 Arizona Cardinals, who came off that big win last week over the Browns, going to Seattle to take on the 11-3 Seahawks, who currently have the number 1 seed. Now, this is a trap game. Let's call it what it is. This is absolutely a trap game. Trap with a capital T. Here's why. Arizona is not to be trifled with. I think we could all agree on that at this point. If you're taking them lightly, you're going to be bit. Just ask the Browns. And we all know damn well that the Seattle Seahawks are going to stay up late Saturday night watching what the 49ers do in their game against the Rams. We all know they're going to be sitting there watching and, staying up late, focusing on their opponent, because next week they got to play them, and it's probably going to be for all the marbles. And now you got this 4-win Arizona team coming to town that, let's be honest, maybe you're not giving as much respect to as you should. And maybe you're overlooking them a bit. Because, you got that massive matchup next week. That's why this is a trap game. It has all the markers of a trap game. Lowly team, tough matchup next week. Division opponent, literally playing the night before, with a lot on the line in that game. So, this is a trap game if I've ever seen one. Speaking to Arizona real quick, they found a really great rhythm with Kenyon Drake running the ball last week. And could we see a heavy dose of him again this week? I think we should. Seattle is currently ranked as an average rush defense. They're currently ranked as the 15th best rush defense, giving up an average of 107.3 rush yards per game. And we've already talked about that, that Seattle defense isn't really anything special or anything to write home about. They're just about average in most categories. So, we could see a heavy dose of Kenyon Drake, in my opinion. Speaking of the Cardinals defense real quick, they are one of the most atrocious defenses in the entire NFL. 32nd in total defense, so dead last, giving up 413.1 yards per game, and averaging giving up 28.4 points per game. That's second worst. So that's the 31st scoring defense in the league. Seattle is a high-flying offense. We've been over this to death. Russell Wilson and the rest of that offense got back on page last week against Carolina. Chris Carson was putting in work. Tyler Lockett was doing really good. As long as that offense can show up, I think they'll be fine and everything will be okay. Just don't overlook this Cardinals team. That's all I'm saying, Seattle. Don't go in and drop this ball against this Cardinals team, because that could be very, very disastrous. I'll take Seattle to win, but it's a trap game and it's worth keeping an eye on, in my opinion. And we're moving on to the last game at the late afternoon time slot. And it's the game that we're all not looking forward to. You got the 7-7 Dallas Cowboys, who came off that big win over the Rams last week, finally beat a team over 500. Going to Philadelphia to take on the also 7-7 Philadelphia Eagles, who have won 2 straight. This is it, people. The long national nightmare of the NFC East is finally almost over. We just got to get through this game. A big storyline going into this one, though, is Dak Prescott, the Cowboys quarterback. If you haven't been following the storylines coming out of Dallas, he has a hurt shoulder. He apparently hurt it at some point in the first half against the Rams, which would explain why his numbers weren't that good. And there's talk that, he should be able to play, but he's going to be very hampered. There's talk that he's missed 2 straight days in practice and he's not throwing the football down there in Texas. So it'll be very, very interesting to see how he comes out and how he looks in this game. I think he will play, like I just said, but he's probably going to be very limited. And everybody's been saying, all week long that the key to this game is Ezekiel Elliott. Cowboys just got to get back to what they do best and run the football. And with Dak hurt and not maybe at his best, they could potentially be right. But I feel like everybody's forgetting about the fact that for most of the season, the Philadelphia rush defense has been pretty solid. They've been in the top 5 or at least top 3 for most of the year. Currently ranked as the 3rd best rush defense, averaging giving up 90.4 rush yards per game. So they've been stout, and I think there's only been one game where they've really been run over a bunch by an opposing rush attack. So if Dak is limited and really can't do much, and you have to rely on Zeke to carry the load for most of that offense, that could be a potential disaster for the Cowboys' offense. And just have a Philadelphia's defense that just loads the box and tee off on your run game and have no fear of your passing offense. Now, we're going to turn and talk to the Philadelphia offense. How will their offense perform? They had the nice outing last week against a very bad Washington team, but it's been hard to count on them all year long. And the same could be said for the Cowboys' defense to a certain extent. The last time these two met, it was a blowout in favor of the Cowboys. I don't think we're going to be getting that. I think we're going to get a close, maybe probably ugly, sloppy game, especially if Dak's hurt. This Eagles offense feels like it struggles to do the most basic things right. And we don't even know who's going to play wide receiver for the Eagles this weekend. I mean, who's it going to be? Greg Ward again? I mean, my goodness, you don't know who you're getting every single week. This game is going to be ugly. It's going to be sloppy. It's going to be the game everybody's talking about in the late afternoon. And the entire nation will be held hostage once again as the NFC East dumpster fire consumes us all. Now, I will be picking a winner for this game, and I will tell you who it is here in a second. But I think the most NFC East possible outcome for this game, the most on-brand, on-par thing for this division, would be that the Eagles win this game. They cannot clinch if they win. They cannot clinch the division if they win this game. Is that if the Eagles win this game, and then next week, both the Eagles and Cowboys lose, and that would give the NFC East to the Dallas Cowboys by default. It would be the most on-brand thing possible for the NFC East if the division winner is a team that proceeded to lose out over the final 2 weeks. Simply beautiful. Oh man. I'll take Dallas to win this one. Dallas is the only team in this situation that can clinch the NFC East. If Dallas wins, they are mathematically the NFC East champions. I'm not confident about that. Like I said, it's going to be ugly. It's going to be low scoring. It's going to be sloppy. And if Dak Prescott is hurt and not playing his best football, that just increases the likelihood that Philadelphia is going to hang around and be in there. You just can't trust the Eagles to do the most basic things on offense. So I don't know if you could even trust them to win this game. Even though it's in Philadelphia, it's in December. That has, a Cowboys collapse written all over it. And I speak from traumatic experience of my youth of cheering for my Cowboys only to get their brains beaten in by Philadelphia in December. I'll take the Cowboys to win. And I guess we'll be celebrating. I don't know if you can even say celebrate with the NFC East at this point. Celebrating an NFC East champion in the late afternoon hour. And we're moving on to Sunday Night Football. I don't know if you could say interesting about this game. I almost just called it interesting. I don't know if we could say that. Because you got the 10-4 Kansas City Chiefs, who've won 4 straight, really morphing into a Super Bowl contender before our eyes, going to Chicago to take on. I wonder if the Bears are. I'm going to call them the depressed Chicago Bears. That's what they are right now. They're 7-7 depressed Chicago Bears. Now, Bears had their hearts broken last week by the Packers and were mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. So how will they look? I wouldn't be surprised if they come out and we see a half-hearted effort from them all the way around because, let's be honest, they don't got nothing to play for. I mean, okay, maybe you beat a Chiefs team and maybe you caused some ruckus in the AFC playoff picture. Uh, what do the Bears really have to play for? That's what I'm asking. And I don't see much. Now turning to Kansas City. Ever since they lost that shootout to the Titans a couple weeks ago, their defense has been playing incredible football, averaging 11.2 points per game and shutting down anybody and their great-grandmother who comes their way. Granted, those teams that they played aren't exactly world beaters, like the Broncos and the Chargers on offense. They're not teams that put up a lot of points on offense, but at this point, it doesn't really matter. Just stack some wins and get, the best possible seeding that you can in the playoffs. Now, you would think, Sunday Night Football in Chicago in late December, most offenses and quarterbacks would probably come in and struggle in that situation. It would be very fair to expect that. And nobody would blame them if they did. But after watching what Kansas City did last week in the snow in Kansas City and how their offense didn't seem, phased at all, I'm confident that this team could go anywhere in any environment, in any torrential downpour or snow or sleet and put up points and be just fine and play well on offense. I am confident. I am getting more confident every single week about this Chiefs team. And like I said when we started talking about this game, Kansas City is morphing into a complete team. This team is becoming a Super Bowl contender in front of our very eyes. And that should scare everybody else in the AFC playoffs. Because not only are they becoming a complete team, they have confidence. This team beat Baltimore. So if it has to come to that, I think they have confidence that they could do it again. This is the kind of team that could really go deep into the playoffs, make a Super Bowl, and win a Super Bowl. They are a complete team with the offense and the defense. Kansas City is good right now. And despite, being 10-4, you say it like it's a bad thing, they're the third seed in the playoffs. I think they're the second best team in the AFC. I think they're a lot better than New England. And I think the gap between Kansas City and Baltimore isn't as far as some people might think. I really like Kansas City, and I'm high up on them. I'm getting more hype on them every single week. And because I don't know what kind of effort we're going to get from the Bears, if they're going to come out half-hearted, uninterested, we might get those sloppy, bad Bears offenses that we saw a couple weeks ago. I'm taking Kansas City to win on a Sunday Night Football in Chicago. But it's just going to be very interesting to see what the Bears look like on offense. And we're moving on to our last game, the last Monday Night Football game of the year, and it should actually be a fun one. You got the 11-3 Green Bay Packers going to who have won 3 straight, going to Minnesota to take on the 10-4 Vikings who have won 2 straight. Here we go, people. NFC North on the line. If the Packers win this game, they mathematically clinch the NFC North. So it's a pretty big game on Monday Night Football. Going out with a bang for them. So it sounds like Dalvin Cook, the Vikings running back, will not be able to play in this game, and that's a massive blow to that offense after suffering that shoulder injury last week against the Chargers. It's a massive blow for this reason, because the Vikings offense the last couple weeks, has just been turning in okay performances. Okay, with, quotations around it. Nothing really great or grandiose, but, if Dalvin Cook isn't playing, Kirk Cousins and that passing offense is really going to have to step up. Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, Kyle Rudolph, they're really going to have to put on a show, in my opinion, to, give that team a chance without Cook. But the good news for the Vikings is these last 2 weeks, their defense has played well. Remember, 2 weeks ago, I said on this podcast that the Vikings need to show me something. And ever since then, they've been showing me a lot. Now, granted, those 2 games came against teams that aren't really good on offense. Well, you know what? The Packers aren't really good on offense right now either, are they? These last 2 weeks, they've been averaging 8.5 points per game that they're giving up on defense. These last 2 weeks. and they've got 9 total turnovers. They are really showing something right now. They're going to need a lot of that on Monday Night Football to help give this team a chance to win. And this is a big test for this Packers team. You know, I'm sensing a growing turn from everybody in the media, including myself, even though I'm not media, to people are starting to turn on the Packers a little bit. You know, people are starting to question them now, and I think that's good because, you know, what have the Packers really done? None of their stats or numbers say they're good. They don't really have a marquee big win. I mean, they beat the Vikings earlier this year, but that was when the Vikings really weren't playing that well. Now it's a little bit different. And, you know, this Vikings defense has been playing well for the last few weeks. Now they have to go on the road to Minnesota. This is a big test for the Packers. Show that they can hang around with, you know, an above-average team in the NFL. And here's a very interesting tidbit. The Vikings are undefeated at home this season. They are 6-0 at home this season. That should scare teams. I really want to take the Vikings. I've said it for a long time that I think these last couple of weeks, I think about the past month plus, that I think the Vikings are the best team in the NFC North. But if they don't have Dalvin Cook, I don't know. I don't think I can take them. And that sucks. Without him, I just don't know what we will see from their offense. I'm going to take Green Bay to win this game. I'm really not confident about that. I wanted to take Minnesota, but without Dalvin Cook, I just think it makes too much of a difference. I'll take Green Bay to win, but I think it'll be very interesting to watch how close this game is, how the Packers' offense performs in this one. Because, you know, they struggled against Washington for most of that game against the Giants. They really weren't that great. It'll be very, very interesting to see what they look like in a primetime game with everybody watching against a Vikings defense that has played really good the last couple weeks. It'll be very interesting to watch. So, that's it for this week's preview show. So, the next time we talk, it will be Tuesday, Christmas Eve, December 24th, where we'll recap all the games we just previewed. And that's all we'll do on that show that week because there's no Thursday Night Football again next week. We're getting close, people. Like I said at the beginning of the show, we're getting close. You can smell the postseason in the air. So, thanks for stopping by, and I'll talk to you on Christmas Eve. Bye.